Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about player expectations. And what I mean by that is when you're making a game, you have to somehow convey to people what this game is going to be, and they're going to form expectations of what they're going to get. And that is really, really tough to manage. And I'm going to talk about like how you go about trying to do it, what some of the problems are, and why sometimes new IP makes it easier and sometimes it makes it harder. So, and yes, I apologize. The dog is at my feet and snoring really loudly in this video. So let's talk about how you try to manage player expectations. Until the game ships or get close to shipping, you will use probably interviews. Marketing tends not to be done till later. But interviews are a very narrow bandwidth. It's, people want to come and talk to you about your game, but frequently they want to talk to you about other things too. What do you think about this thing going on in the industry? What do you think about where you're working? What do you think about this other game that came out? And you want to talk about your game, but you have no control in those interviews how it will be edited later. So frequently you find yourself saying a long explanation and they pull this one sentence out and that's what gets out. So then when you finally do have more control over marketing, you have to remember marketing costs money, and marketing comes more towards the end of the production cycle when the game is almost ready to come out, because then you have more to show and you can show things. But a lot of people have already formed an expectation by then. They've heard the name of your game, they saw a single solitary still ad, they maybe heard a clip from an interview, and they have formed an opinion of what you're making. Now, yes, I just have to say right now, the reason this is important is a lot of players will love or hate a game based on how closely it matches their expectations. And because those expectations are hard to manage, and you often end up with people who dislike your game for reasons that weren't at all what you said you were going to do. So the best marketing in the world can't stop people from hearing one thing, imagining something else, and then blaming their imagination on the developers or the publishers. I'm not saying, by the way, that deceptive marketing doesn't happen and that people say deliberately vague or deceptive things in interviews. I try not to do that, but I have found that even though I won't say something, people will assume something. Now, this is the point where I've got to talk about the elephant in the room, where people talk about how the commonly used phrase "from the makers of," or "from the developers of," or "from the creator of," they think that's deceptive. And part of the reason we do that is we're trying to form an expectation in a very narrow window. We don't have a 30-minute interview to go into details, and we only have a print ad or a 15-second trailer you're going to watch, and we need to we're trying to make you understand what you're doing. But I understand why that phrase "from the makers, developers, creators" feels deceptive, because what does that actually mean? If you're saying here's a new game and it's from the makers of this other game, does that mean the new game setting is going to be similar? Does that mean mechanics are going to be similar? Does that mean that it has similar kinds of characters? Does it mean it has similar humor? Does it mean all of those things? Does it have to mean all those things? And if it doesn't mean all those things, it was deceptive? I don't think so. But we're trying to draw parallels to things so that in a very tiny window, you guys have an idea of what's coming. And a lot of people go, well, then just show us a trailer, an actual gameplay trailer, because a lot of games do what are called cinematic trailers, which aren't actual footage from the game. And yes, that can be deceptive. You may think the game is at a much better frame rate or has a much better detail or shows your character in the third person, but when you actually go to play, it's first person only. So I can see some of that. But if you're actually showing a 15 or 30-second in-game trailer, people still think that can be deceptive, because if you put something in because you want to show it and then people think that's going to be all throughout the game, like you show some really cool combat with some really cool maneuvers, and then they find out, wait, you don't get those maneuvers until 10 hours into the game. Those are really like high-level spells or high-level abilities. That's deceptive. Or you leave something out because you don't want to we don't want to reveal the big fight at the end with the dragon. And then people go, wait a minute, I thought this was a low fantasy adventure game, and then at the end you have a big combat with a dragon. What is this? So, no matter what you do, sometimes people will imagine something and they imagine it wrong, and then you're blamed. I shouldn't even say blamed. It's they form the wrong expectations, and then when they play the game, they don't like it. And like I did a whole video on how whether something's bad is very subjective, and a lot of people disagreed and were saying, no, there's obviously bad games. And all I can tell you is, a lot of times when you say there's an obviously bad game, there's someone else who liked the game. I hear people say that really popular games are obviously bad, and then they use that whole McDonald's. Do you think McDonald's is the best hamburger in the world? No, I do not. But they got to be doing something right because they sell billions of them. So what I would probably say is a McDonald's hamburger is consistent. I can buy one in Boise and Boca Raton, and they're pretty much going to be the same Big Mac. The price is, the expectation for the price is pretty valid. Although recently I've heard about, well, there's this McDonald's in a rest stop that charges $18 for a Big Mac. Okay, I get that, but your expectation is you're not going to be paying $18 for a Big Mac. What McDonald's is selling is consistency, expectation matching, and fast and convenient. That's what they're selling most of all. If you want a really, really good burger, like cream of the crop, you're going to go somewhere else. But that doesn't mean McDonald's is bad. They've just managed to set most people's expectations to the right thing, and now they've sold billions of burgers. That's the thing with games. You're trying to get people's expectations aligned with the game you're providing. Now, in some ways, this is easier with a new IP because people don't have any expectations. So as long as you carefully manage what you say in interviews and carefully manage what you do in marketing, you can help form those expectations to something that's more in line with the game you're going to do. However, there are other ways in which a new IP is much, much harder. Like I've said, you don't control every quote you say that will appear in an interview. And when you're doing a trailer, you have a few seconds to show things that are really important for the game and hope that the way you're showing it makes people understand the type of feature it is and the frequency it will show up and how it will interact with other things. Because I've seen tons of trailers that are 15 seconds long and people will read into it things that I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not necessarily what they're trying to tell you, but they will read into it anyway. And that's just because, and this is the big problem, is people hear something in their head, they imagine something or they exaggerate that thing, and then bam, expectations are off. And it took me a long time to realize I just can't control that. This channel has taught me I just can't control that. People will listen to you without hearing. They will see something without really looking at it. And thanks, Windows. And because of that, they will just form the wrong expectations. That is true for a subset of every game you're ever going to make. So the best you can ever hope to do is how small can I make that subset? And the only way I found to do that is to, when your game is nearing the end of production, pick a few things and double down on that on every interview, on every trailer, on every, quote you make, every bite-sized, quote that people want to get. You have to just double down on it. This game is X. This game is X. For Arcanum, we kept saying, this is an industrial revolution in Tolkien's world. Bam, they get it. It's very similar to the elevator pitches I've mentioned. You've basically got to just double down on all that. It's the best you can do. You are still going to have people who misunderstand and think they were being sold one thing and they got another. There's literally nothing you can do about those people, but you do try to make most people not feel like they were deceived, but instead it's like, oh, I see what they were saying. Yeah, that's not necessarily something I'd be into. That's fine. So if you're making your own game, I hope this helps you understand what you should do in interviews and trailers and other marketing that you do. So anyway, that's how to manage player expectations in a nutshell.